Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Ridge Community Church podcast. My name is John. I'm one of the pastors on staff at the Ridge, and our vision is to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. So as a piece of that, our goal each week is to bring you something that's hopeful and helpful. So subscribe to this podcast to make sure you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast. If you find today's episode hopeful and helpful, then please follow or subscribe, and then rate and review so that more people can find the conversation. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to give us a follow and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any conversations. Now today is part 2 of our Q&A with the lead pastor of the Ridge, Mark Weigt. If you missed part 1, make sure you catch that because it's filled with some really great insights. But in this half of the conversation, Mark answers your questions about how he decides on message topics, marriage questions, some parenting questions, and more. This is my conversation with Mark. Okay, shifting gears a little bit here. We have some questions about your process about writing messages. So, how do you prepare? Yeah. They've got some notes for you.
Yes.
You know?
Good.
How do you prepare your heart and then hear from God as you build messages and series to share?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say this, and you were there when I spoke to the staff about this not too long ago. But our heart is our heart for God's the most important thing. Of our heart, all that stuff. Okay, Jesus talks about whatever comes out. Our mouth is from our heart. All that stuff. So even before even thinking about message stuff or anything like that, I think it's really important that we vitally assess the condition of our heart with God on a regular basis. And because it's really hard to really hear from God if your heart's a mess and your heart's apathetic towards God. I mean, it really is. And it doesn't take much for that to happen because we have so much being thrown at us. And so this is something we have to fight to do and prioritize to do. And so for me, the spirit, the basic stuff, sometimes following Jesus, it's really just about blocking and tackling, as we say. It's really just the spiritual disciplines, man, daily being in the scriptures, spending time alone with God through prayer. When you read things in the scriptures, what is God speaking to you about? And then trying to apply those things and just taking steps in your faith, doing the things like we talked about, like forgiveness and just, being open to those things and steps, allowing God to push us and being challenged with things we don't agree. Just a lot of questions we just talked through.
Yeah.
Okay. Are just such a big part of them because any of those things can hurt our heart. So when you get to that point, then for me, what I do is I kind of look at it in series format. All right. Then I do a couple things. What's God doing in my heart? Is there something that's kind of bubbling to the surface that's just really resonating at this point in my life? Because I know if it's resonating with me, then it'll hopefully and probably resonate with others.
Yeah.
And so I'll often look at that. I'll often look at, I'm always studying culture. So I'm going, hey, what's culture saying right now? And looking at that whole thing. And then I just kind of go from there. Those are really the things. And it's changed over time. And we've had some series that we've had planned, but then all of a sudden we've gotten close. And we're like, man, I don't think that's what God wants us to do right now. Let's do this. And that's happened a lot more recently, probably than in the past.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that is that I feel like people listening, they may not be preparing for a message, right, or a message series, but I feel like everybody wants direction from God in their life, you know. And so I think that there's a really natural parallel between, hey, how do you get ready to prepare a message or a series? Like I love that you start with the heart stuff because like, well, I want to hear from God, but maybe I'm not willing to work on my heart to hear from God, So I think that's
well, think about this, John. God always works out of what he's doing in our lives and what we're allowing him to do in our lives. Yeah. Right? He really does. And so that's just such a really important part. I know I talked to our team about this a lot, especially our teaching team. When we craft a message, it always is a process of something that's being built. So I never sit down and go, okay, I'm going to write a message and then I write it all and then it's done. It's a lengthy process of it starts somewhere and then all the time it starts to build and build and build and build and build and build. And then I'll be like, okay, that's how our faith journey is. That's why the message thing is, it's God's going to start somewhere with us.
Yeah.
And then he's going to build, and then he's going to build, and then he's going to build. And I always get help from other people when it comes to message writing stuff. You guys know this. We send the scripts out. We listen to all that stuff. Well, that's what we need in our faith journey. We need help from other people
Yeah.
along the way. And so there's just a lot of parallels there.
Yeah. That's really cool. Speaking of messages, how's that for a segue?
That's
Here's a question. A few months ago, the guest pastor from Lake Geneva had us ask a crazy, over-the-top, God-sized prayer that was bigger than we could ever hope for. He then asked us to pull out our phone to text the person we prayed for, letting them know we prayed for them. Are there any cool stories from that?
Yeah. Pastor Josh, he's such a great dude, great leader, all that stuff. It's funny when I got back, I heard people say, hey, Pastor Josh had us get out our phone and text people and stuff. Hey, I texted my one and they responded. And I heard a bunch of those stories. It was kind of fun. They're like, hey, I invited them to this and they came, or invited them to at the movies. And I heard a lot of those. It was actually really good. It was really
awesome.
Cool.
That's cool. I mean, there's something power in that, like tangible reminder to take a second and be like, oh, if I'm praying for someone, like you can text them. I think that's really cool.
Hey, sometimes it's just, we're called to be bold, not weird, but just bold. Take a bold step like that.
I love that you separate those two.
Well, yeah.
You got to have enough relational capital to make that happen. Yeah.
Well, people think that, they think boldness is weirdness. And I think that was a bold step. I don't think that was weird. I think that was actually very loving.
Yeah. All right. Another Ridge question. The Ridge doesn't have a big cross displayed in the building. Is that intentional?
Yes. Yes. And I say that not because we don't like crosses or would mind having a cross in our building or things like that. Okay. So the intentionality, I'll give you, I've been asked this question a ton over the years. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you the non-spiritual answers, and then I'll give you the spiritual answer. Okay.
Yeah.
So the non-spiritual answer is twofold. One is because when we went through the process of getting the building rezoned, the city said no crosses on the outside, which I get. It's a Walmart building. Okay. And then we wanted to use our building, make it accessible to organizations in the community and for large gatherings and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we knew that having crosses and a cross would take us out of that. Okay. Because of just, it's where culture is. And we just felt like, what's more important, having a cross up or engaging with people that are far from God in our community? And here's the thing, our answer will be people every time.
Yeah.
And so there's the non-spiritual answers. The spiritual answers this is kind of interesting. When the Bible talks about the cross, how the Bible talks about the cross and how culture today sees the cross are very different. So when the Bible talks about the cross, they talk about more of the message or the way of the cross. And we teach that left and right and believe in that left and right. Okay. They wouldn't have back then. I always say this to people. If Peter and Paul and those guys would hear today that we're wearing cross necklaces and that we have crosses around our building, they would look at us like we were nuts because of just what the cross symbol represented. Because the cross was never the symbol of the early church. That's the interesting thing. It just really wasn't. And then over time, obviously that changed and, all that stuff. And now today, honestly, having crosses all over the place, I tell people having crosses all over the place, now it's a cultural thing. It's like, cool, hey, I've got cross earrings and necklaces and all that stuff. Yeah. And so it honestly takes away from once again, the message or the way of the cross to follow Jesus.
Yeah. And
so for us, that's more important to me. And in essence, we do have crosses around. We'll do stuff during communion, all that stuff. We have crosses and all that stuff. But
totally, yeah.
I get it because some traditions, the cross was huge and having those symbols and up there. And I have nothing against that at all.
Yeah.
But it's just for us, that's kind of where we are with that right now. And we still want organizations to use our building.
Awesome. All right. This can probably be a quick one. Does the Ridge offer Christian counseling?
We don't have any professional Christian counselors on staff, but what we do is we partner with, we vetted and partner with some great Christian counseling organizations that if anyone would email in or whatever, we can give them that list as far as that's concerned. And these are people that we vetted and agree with. And I think great Christian counseling is really important.
Yeah. Awesome. Uh, we got some questions on marriage.
Okay.
A couple of kind of challenging marriage situations. So,
Hmm.
this is the first one. My husband has been mad at me for about 2 weeks and refuses to speak to me. I've tried to talk, but he acts like I'm not even there. I've asked God to help me deal with this, but I'm just feeling numb. What do I do?
Well, oh man, yeah, that's really tough and hard.
Yeah.
I first off, I'm answering this question without knowing the full story. Okay, so I
Yeah.
mean, it's really limited information. But the first thing I would have you do is, and I would say this to anyone. Okay, so this is kind of a guiding principle. If there's conflict like that, and pretty deep conflict like that, before you deal with the conflict, you need to deal with you and your heart. Because if your heart's not in the right place, you're not going to handle it well, and it'll make it worse. And so, there may need to be some forgiveness that you need to. This is between once you give to God. You don't go to the other person and go, "Hey, I forgive you for not that." But this is some forgiveness that need to be exchanged. And then I always do this when there's conflict. I always say, "Am I going to talk to that person because I love them and I want what's best for them?" And if I can't answer those questions in the right way, then I don't go and deal with it at that point.
Hmm.
Because if I can answer it in the right way and mean it, I'm going to deal with it differently. Okay. So knowing that that's the case, here's what I would do if those things are intact. I would go to that person and I would just say something like this. Um, and I'd lovingly, can you tell me when you'll be ready to talk?
Hmm.
Rather than why won't you talk to me and all that stuff? Hey, can you tell me when you'll be ready? And see if they give you an answer. If they just ignore you, you just got to leave that in their court.
Yeah.
The other thing I would tell you is obviously if this is 2 weeks, there's probably some deeply rooted things there in the marriage itself. Okay. I'm not blaming anybody. I
Yep.
always say every marriage problem takes two to some degree, some more, some less.
Sure.
I would say that Christian counseling question might be something that even if you have to take the step in and deal with first without him
Hmm.
or her, that's what you do. But eventually, hopefully, you get both of you involved. And then I would say this: get into a couples group, get into a
Hmm.
couples, get
Have that
community,
support. Yeah.
get with community, get with other people,
Hmm.
get with other people.
Um, Next question. And this is a really interesting, nuanced one. I'm a follower of Jesus, but my spouse is not.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this person's actually phrasing it here. I read Paul's words about being in a relationship with a non believer, and I believe I am to stay in
Mm-hmm.
this relationship. But my feelings of unsureness is real. I don't know what God's plan is for me in this relationship. How can I maintain a Christian approach daily? And then I appreciate her honesty here, or this person's honesty. I feel deserted by Jesus at times. My faith at times feels like I'm failing.
Yeah, that's oh man, that's really good. I mean, I think that's so well said. I've heard that before
Yeah.
from other people that struggle with the very same thing, and so I love how that person worded that. Once again, I'm answering this without knowing the full story. Okay, so I mean, there's different things. If um, whether this person who wrote it is a man or a woman, and I don't know those things. Okay, but here's what I would tell you. I think you're right in Paul words. Paul words are telling you to stay in the relationship, assuming there's no abuse or okay. I mean, adultery, things like that. Okay, I'm assuming that there's not. So God's plan is for you to stay and not just stay. We know what God's plan for us in a marriage is, and so if you're the husband, you are to love your wife as Christ loved the church. There's your plan. There's God's plan for you in the marriage. If you are the wife in the marriage, it is to submit to your husband, and because that's what he calls us to, is to respect your husband. And so those are God's plans. And at the same time, even in the book of Peter, I think it's First Peter 3, talks about just the importance of just living our lives before our spouse. And through that, it may tweak our spouse's interest who's not a believer. And just because they're like, hey, what's going on there? And that's not a magic wand. Okay. It's not like,
Yeah.
hey, if you do this for a week, no, this may be a lifelong journey, but hey, listen, if that spouse becomes a Jesus follower, let's say 10 years from now, and it completely transforms that person's life and your marriage, I think that 10 years is worth it. It's hard, but it's worth it.
Mm. Like I said, I really appreciate the honesty and just the transparency in that. I think
Oh yeah,
that's,
there's going to be a lot of wrestling there and a
yeah.
lot of hard days and hard. Oh yeah, that's real. And you got to wrestle that with God. And I would also add, get into once again, a small group with someone, with, whether it be a men's group or women's group type thing. And you're going to find other people with the same story. And man, they're going to wrestle with you. They're going to pray with you. They're going to encourage you a lot. And we need that.
Yeah. Real quick, let me pause. How are you doing on time?
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Cool. All right. Well then, last section here is some questions about parenting, which you can have as much fun with as or not as
yeah. This would be fun.
Yeah. What did you and Donna do as parents to instill Christian values into your children? Whether that was family devotional, was it Bible studies, encourage their own Bible studies, etc. But not to overwhelm them and make them turn from God, but to truly draw them closer to God, to have a personal relationship with Him.
Yeah,
I suppose this has also got some interesting nuances as a pastor as well. But
oh yeah, and people will say, "Well, pastor's kid, that's easy." No, it actually can be harder because pastors' kids go one of two ways. They're either all in or all out. Okay, and so we've experienced both. Here's a couple of things that Donna and I did. I think this, and I always tell couples this. I always say, look for, man, if you have kids, don't learn on the job, all right, because they're human beings. And so I always tell couples, look for some parents, some families that are raising great kids, and they're following Jesus or taking steps towards that. You just see how they're living their life and making good decisions, and then go and sit down with them for coffee or dinner and just ask them a bunch of questions and learn from them. Okay, that's what we did, and it helped us so much. One of the things that we learned and that we did is, and this is, I think, one of the most important things, set a goal as a parent. Like, what's your goal as parents? Because we know this, what do goals do? They focus us. They give us a North Star. They give us something to shoot for, and then we make decisions that lead us to the goal. Set a goal. Here, our goal is this. We want to raise our kids in an environment to follow Jesus and get them to a place and equip them to live on their own. We want to create an environment for them to follow Jesus and equip them to live on their own. And so that was our goal. And so we made all the decisions around that. So, man, we made sure they were consistent in kids, going to kids ministry and students. When sports and all that stuff started to come and started to engulf them, we said, man, does that achieve our goal? And so sometimes we just made the tough decision and said, nope, this is our goal. And this is what's best for them. Culture doesn't determine what's best for them. Our goal determines what's best for them, because this is what they're going to take with them. And so we would make tough decisions like that. As you get older and their kids get older, your role in that goal changes. So you're more hands-on when they're younger, and then all of a sudden when they're older, we're more of a coach in a coaching role with that. I'll often hear kids, parents say, well, I don't want to force my kids. I don't want to force my kids to go. All right. All that stuff. And I always tell them this, who's the parent in the relationship? Okay. I mean, you're the parent. If you don't force your kids and you allow them to make decisions like that on their own, they're like, well, they may be turned off by God anyways. Yep. And they may also leave God if you don't. So it doesn't matter. I'd rather keep them in the environment that as a parent. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't reward them and encourage them and all that stuff, but you don't let them make that decision while they're living under your household. You're the parent. We never allowed our kids to make that decision. If they choose to go elsewhere outside of that, that's okay. So there are some things there as they get older. It's really important, if you want them to follow Jesus, that you create space for conversation and doubts and all that stuff. And
any practical things on that? Like,
yeah, I would ask our kids. I always had one-on-one time, like let's say with the twins, I'll just say, but there's 3. And I would just say, hey, tell me what you're learning about God in students. Hey, tell me what you're learning about hey, what are kids at school think? What do they think about God? What do you hear? And of course, they'd be like, public school. Oh, this, that, this, that. What do you think about that?
Mm.
And how do you struggle with that? I just ask them questions and let them talk about it. And then we encourage, because as students, you can do this in student ministry. We encourage them to go to student ministry. We didn't give them the option. And then what would happen was in student ministry, they have small group leaders and stuff like that, man. And they get to a certain age, they build trust with that small group leader. They're going to start talking to that person. And that's really key. Most kids, we pull them out because we say, this is more important. And then they deal with struggles, and then they have no one to turn to. And they're not going to turn to mom and dad at that age. They're going to have those student mentors and leaders that are really important. So those are just some of the things that we did to really help.
I'm curious, how did you have conversations with them about the things that you're like, nope, sorry, you're going to go to this thing? Like, or, we're going to say no to this thing because, for lack of a better term, because God, right? How do you have those conversations in a way it's not like creating this, I don't know, bitterness or?
Well, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. If we always had we would always use certain principles that fit our goal. Okay.
Yeah.
That we would always, one of them was, hey, selfish kids become selfish adults. And that was one of them. And so what would happen is that what that meant was we're not going to give our kids everything that they want and allow them to do everything that they want to do. And so sometimes tension is really good. And so when there was tension like that, we didn't go like, well, we want our kids to like us. We're their parents. We're not their friends. We'll become their friends, as they now move out of college and all that stuff. But right now we're their parents. So popularity wasn't important to Donna and me at that point. So what we would do is when there was tension with that, we'd always say, hey, listen, we know we know that you'd rather do something else and everybody's doing something else and all that stuff. But at this point in your life, we just are trying to do what's best for you. And at some point you're going to be able to make your own decision. And, but right now, that's not that point. And so we would acknowledge that, and we would just do it in a real, not in a tense way or anything like that, but that's what we would do.
That's really good. Challenging, I'm sure.
It is. And cultures, the pressure on it now is even more. This is more important. This is more important. This is more important. And what we don't realize is that when we make this, if we say we want our kids to follow Jesus, which here's the thing, most likely that more than sports is going to carry them in their 20s and 30s. Okay. I mean, it just is.
Yeah.
But if we then make decisions based on where that's not as important and all this other stuff is more important, and then we're frustrated that they're not following Jesus, it's not their fault at that point. We're just giving them the message of priorities.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think, the right message.
So I'm curious, this question is like kind of a follow-up on that. What might you choose to do differently seeing your children as your children are older now?
What might I do differently? I think what we need to do differently, this is where, once again, regular touch points outside the normal schedule of life are really important. I think at this is the coach mode. This is you do check-ins with your kids. Yeah. And you're asking them questions. Hey, how are you doing here? And they're not always going to be honest. They're kids. Okay. They're not always going to be honest and all that stuff. But what you're doing there is you're creating an atmosphere of trust with your kids. That's not for the present. It's for the future. Because eventually they're going to get to a point where they mature. And then they're going to go, oh yeah, hey, I can talk to my mom. I can talk to my dad. And so those environments and I just ask them questions, and I don't look to correct them necessarily, but what I will do is I look to share stories and go like, oh man, I remember struggling with that. And they'll be like, you struggled with that? Oh yeah, I struggled with that. It was really hard. And here's what I did to walk through that. And so it is just, I think as they get older, those touch points are really, really critical. And to step out of it, like we go to Dairy Queen, that's our place and all that stuff. And we do that. And it's just, man, I tell you, it's once they feel like you're in their corner, and you're not in their corner because you allow them to do whatever they want to do. That's what culture teaches us nowadays. That's not true. Kids crave boundaries. But once they know you're in their corner because trust and vulnerability is exchanged, you're connecting with your kids at a very deep level. And that'll come around in the future.
Yeah. That's really good. Yeah, I mean, so those are a lot of the questions we had. I didn't get to all of them. Is there any, as we wrap up, is there any final thoughts you have that you just you're hoping to share?
Yeah, these are great questions. I appreciate the vulnerability of people to share them. It's sacred stuff. Also, just know that this idea of deconstruction that we're going to talk about, it's it it's really something that we need to step into, because if we don't step into it and understand what to do when we have it, it'll either build up walls between us and God, or we'll become apathetic, or for some of us, we'll just stop going altogether, and then we'll live with this phrase, which is so common. Yeah, I don't go anymore, but I still believe. Okay, which is really justifying not going and not doing anything. And I always say this: yep, I believe broccoli is good for you, but I do nothing with it. So what does that mean for me? Okay, well, it's the same thing. All right. And so this is just really important. And if we really learn how to do this, it can really deepen our faith and make it very vibrant and alive. And the other thing I would say is this: the people around you that we call our ones, that are people in our lives who just, we love and God loves, and we want them to connect with God. They are doing this all the time, and they are looking for places to ask questions and to wrestle and safety and all that stuff. You mean I can? Yeah, it's okay. Hey, yeah, that's okay. And so share this with them, invite them, pray for them as they walk through this. And like I said, to give people permission to doubt and to wrestle and struggle, you'd be surprised the open doors that God will as we do that.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. I love that you bring up the year one stuff, because I feel like not even just being able to see questions get answered that they may have, but also to be able to see the willingness for people to wrestle with faith. Like I said, like I mentioned the word refreshing before, right? Like that's got to be so refreshing to somebody that's, maybe has these conceptions or these thoughts of what churches are like or what they do and how they hold tightly onto things. It's like, no, you can ask these questions. Let's wrestle through them. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, just believe it doesn't do it for people. It doesn't do it for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. Why would it do it for other people? And we just got to be okay when someone says, man, I don't believe in that. I can't agree with that right now. And here's the thing. We don't need to be God's attorney and try to win the case for him. But what we do need to do is create the space, the safe space for them. And when we create the safe space for them, man, the Holy Spirit just works in their heart.
That's so good. Well, Mark, thank you so much for chatting with me. Thanks for answering all these questions, and really getting excited for Permission to Deconstruct.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me, John.
Well, that was my conversation with Mark, and there's a lot of really good stuff in there, but I really appreciated Mark's insight on creating trust in conversations with your kids. Make sure to check out Permission to Deconstruct on our YouTube channel or in person. And thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast. Make sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations.